Hello everyone, welcome back to CFA with Jay. And this is actually my third time recording this video on this particular module because first time I forgot to hit record button, and the second time I don't know, some problem happened and my sound wasn't coming so good in that video. So I had to start over this for the third time. Hopefully I've changed a few things, so hopefully this will come out good. Let's begin. Okay, so we'll be starting with economics module one. So for starters, we need to learn about what elasticity is and how elasticity works in the economic or in the market, then market structures and then Nash equilibrium and etc. etc. Let's move forward. So first, there we need to know what elasticity is. So for that, what is price elasticity? So it is technically how much demand changes when price changes. So there are two types. So one is elastic demand and another is inelastic demand. So for elastic demand, let's take an example. If the price of a pizza drops by 20%, then the sales actually shoot up by 40%. That's elastic demand. When the prices of a product drop, the demand for that product increases. That's when it is called as elastic demand. And when is it inelastic? For example, if the prices of salt doubles, but the demand will still remain the same. This is what is called as inelastic demand. No matter what changes in price occur, the demand for the product will never change. And that is what inelastic demand is. Next is cross price elasticity. Now, how this tells us how the demand for one product responds to the changes in the another product's price. Let's take an example. Suppose there is coffee and there is tea. So if coffee prices rises, people will switch to tea. They will not go towards coffee. They will go to tea. And this is what cross price elasticity means. Next is income elasticity. Now, what is income elasticity? It is basically how demand changes as income changes. Let's take an example. For example, when income rises, demand for luxury cars will also increase. Now, as people can spend more, they will, because of their increased income, the demand for good type of products will also increase. This is what income elasticity means. Next, we have what is actually total product of labor, what is average product of labor, and what is marginal product of labor. Now, total product of labor, as it says, that total output of all the workers in your company. Then, for average product of labor, it is average. Average means output per worker. Okay, and for marginal product of labor, it means that extra output from one more worker that you have hired. Then there is total cost, which is again overall cost of production. Then there is average cost, that is cost per unit of product that you produce. Marginal cost, the extra cost you have to bear for producing one more unit of a product. So one of the things that you should be aware of is that firm always compares marginal revenue with marginal cost to decide on how much to produce in that particular firm. So next we have four types of market structures. First is perfect competition, second is monopolistic competition, third is oligopoly, and fourth is monopoly. Let's start with perfect competition. Now in perfect competition, there are many number of sellers. The products are homogeneous, barriers to entry are very low. I mean that anybody can come in that market and start selling their products. Pricing power is very low. The demand curve here is perfectly elastic and long run profits are zero. You need to remember all of these pointers. Just remember them, okay? Now, let me tell you that also one more thing that you need to remember is that perfect competition, it will have always a well-defined supply function, okay? Just remember that. Now, let's take an example of a perfect competition. Now, an example of a perfect competition is wheat farmers. So there are many sellers of wheat, correct? All have identical products, and because of that, there is no pricing power in that. competition, and because of that there is zero long run profits. Done. Next is monopolistic competition. Now in monopolistic competition also there are many number of sellers, but you can say differentiation. It says that yes, there is difference, the products are differentiated, barrier to entry are lower, not as low as perfect competition we can say, but they are low. Pricing power, some because of the strategies that they use. We'll discuss about that. So demand curve is always downward sloping, and even their long run profit is zero always. Now, for monopolistic competition, the supply function is never well defined. Remember that. Now, we were talking about how is it differentiated, correct? So in monopolistic, they bring differentiation by taking on some different advertisement techniques, etc., etc. Let's take an example to better understand this. Restaurants. So there are many restaurants in a city, correct? For example, we are talking about Mumbai. Mumbai is such a big city, and there are many restaurants in that city. But what makes a particular restaurant so special? It is maybe example the taste, or maybe the service that provide, the kind of service that provide, 5 star, 2 star, 3 star. It depends upon that, right? And because of that differentiation, there is some pricing power that they have, but even in this the long run profits fall to zero always. Next is oligopoly market. Now, in oligopoly market, the number of sellers are few. Okay, now we have come to few number of sellers. The product can be homogeneous or differentiated. The barriers to entry are high, not much high we can say, but they are high. Pricing power again, some we'll understand more about it. Now, the demand curve is king. What does it mean by a king demand curve, or when does it happen? So it usually occurs if you have observed that if there are two or three or more companies in the competition, each and every company is, if company A lowers its prices to increase their sales, company B is willing to do that. But if suppose company A is increasing its prices, company B will not do it, because why will they do it? Why will they uh, increase the prices when they can take the market share of company A who has increased the price? So this creates a kinked demand curve. Now, a demand curve is usually like this, but a kinked demand curve is like this. And this junction is called as a kink. Okay. Now, in long run, the profits are positive, not much, but positive. Let's take an example. The smartphone industry. There are few big sellers like Samsung, iPhone, etc., etc. Their decisions are interdependent on each other. Advertising is there, and there is a bit high entry barrier. Nobody can just get up and start a phone business, smartphone business, correct? So this is where oligopoly comes in. Next is monopoly. Now, what is monopoly? As the name itself suggests, monopoly has only one number of seller, and it is the king of that particular market. The product is obviously unique. That's why there is only one company that sells it. Then barrier to entry are very high because there are different reasons, because maybe nobody is able to match the product or the service that they give, etc., etc. Pricing power, obviously the entire pricing power is to that company, but here the demand curve is inelastic, and the long run profits are high, or we can say also very high. Let's take an example, Indian Railways for passenger trains. So there is only one seller, IRTC. It has unique service, it has very high entry barriers, and it has obviously strong pricing power. It is also a government company, or monopoly doesn't need to have a like be backed up by a government, but here in my example it is there. Okay, moving forward to shutdown decisions under perfect competition. Now there are some situations in which firms sometimes decide to shut down their entire operation. Now, when does it actually occur? So, for example, if, okay, situation one is total revenue is equal to total cost. Now, this is actually also known as a break-even point. When total revenue is equal to total cost, it is known as break-even point. In during this point, the companies both in short run and in long run stay in the market. Okay. The second situation is when total revenue is equal to total variable cost, but it is less than total cost. Now, in short run, it will stay in the market. The business will stay in the market, but in long run, it will exit the market. Why? Because there is a phenomena behind this. So technically, in long run, all of the costs that the business has to bear are all variable cost, and technically then total revenue will be less than total variable cost, correct? So in long run they have to exit. Then when total revenue is less than total variable cost, for both short run and in long run you have to exit the market. Let's take an example of it. If a bakery earns enough to cover wages and ingredients, which are variable cost, okay, but not rent, which is fixed cost. It may stay open in short run, but in long run, it has to take an exit because the rent in long run will also become a variable cost. Now, I have not put it in the PPT, but let's just listen to me. We have to learn what economies of scale is, okay? So, what is economies of scale? It is a situation when the increase in production also. Next part is economies of scale. So what happens in economies of scale is when production increases, the unit like cost per unit also lowers. So as your production is increasing, cost per unit will decrease. This is quite advantageous for large firm because they get cost advantage. For example, suppose there is a car factory which is producing 10,000 cars. They get a bulk discount on steel which is required to produce car, which not indirectly, directly lowers its cost. Next is diseconomies of scales. So diseconomies of scale occurs when producing more increases the per unit cost. This usually occurs due to mismanagement or inefficiency. Let's take an example for this too. If the factory becomes too big to manage, cost rises. And due to this, diseconomies of scale occur. There is third concept, that is constant return to scale. Now, constant return to scale occurs when your production is increasing, but your cost per unit will remain the same. This is when constant return to scale occurs. Now, next is short run average cost curve and long run average cost curve. Now, if you see this U shape is a short run average cost curve. Now, short run average cost curve is always U shaped. What does it show? It shows average cost of producing at a given plant size or capacity. Now, in short run, what happens? At least one of the factors is fixed. Let's say here factory size is fixed. So, for example, a bakery has only one oven, okay? If they hire more workers, cost will fall first because there is better use of oven, but later on the cost will rise. Why? Because the too many workers are crowding only 1 hour to fulfill the demand. Now there is another concept, that is long run average cost curve. This U-shaped curve, this bigger curve is long run average cost curve. It is also U-shaped, but it is a bit flatter. Now it is an envelope of all the possible short run average cost curves. In long run, what happens? All inputs are variable, as we have discussed before. So firms can change its factory size, buy more ovens, or build new plants, correct? So what LRAC shows is the lowest possible cost per unit for any level of output given. Like you can think of LRAC as a menu of various best choices of SRAC. So for each level of production, the firm picks the SREC that gives the lowest cost. Now, how is economies of scale and diseconomies of scale related to LRAC? So, economies of scale occurs when there is a downward sloping portion on LRAC. As the firm expands, average cost falls. Okay, common sense. Now, why does it occur? Because bulk buying, then specialization of labor, then better use of machinery, then spreading fixed cost over more outputs. For example, a car company, okay, is producing 1000 cars. We have taken this example, but has a very high cost per car. But now it wants to expand to almost like, let's say, 1 lakh cars. So now, because they're expanding, their average cost per car will fall sharply because fixed cost has spread out over now multiple cars that are being produced, correct? So this is how economies of scale is related to LRAC. Now, how is this economies of scale related to LRAC? The upward sloping portion, this portion, shows us diseconomies of scale. Now, beyond a certain size, the cost actually rises. There can be many reasons for this. Like example, bureaucracy or poor communication. Bureaucracy or poor communication or overcrowding of resources or management inefficiency or higher maintenance cost, we can say. Like now, the car company had expanded to 1 lakh, correct? Now it wants to further expand to 10 million cars per year. Now, managing such a huge operation increases cost. There can be transport delays, there can be mismanagement, there can be coordination failure, etc. etc. Now, because of this economies of scales occurs. Now, there is one more pointer, that is minimum efficient scale. This point, this exact point represents minimum efficient scale. Now, what is this? It is the lowest point on LRSA curve, where long run average cost is the minimized cost that they can show. Okay. Beyond this point, the firm has exhausted all of its economies of scale and diseconomies of scale set in. For example, a smartphone manufacturer is there, okay? So their MES might be 1 million force per year. Below that, the average cost is high. At exactly 1 million, the firm achieves the lowest cost. But producing more won't lower their cost further. It may even push up the cost ups, creating this economies of scale. Have you ever wondered how economists use models to explain their oligopoly behavior or companies' oligopoly behavior? So, what they do is, so there are two models that give us the explanation of this. First is Cournot Model. I don't know how to pronounce it. So, if I did, yay. If I did not, please Google it. So, first is Cournot Model. So, what this model says that the firms choose output simultaneously. Like two firms are there and they will choose output simultaneously, assuming that the rival's output stays constant. For example, let's take that there are two water bottling companies, okay? They decide to on a quantity at the same time. This is what Cournot model says, and this model reaches a stable equilibrium. Because of this assumption, they assume that the company will reach a stable equilibrium. Next is Stackelberg model. The Stackelberg model is based on a very simple theory, that is one firm leads other firms. Let's take an example to understand this. For example, Samsung launches a new phone series, okay, first, setting a certain amount of output. Other firms will adjust their production after Samsung has released. So if Samsung phone is in very high demand, then other companies will reduce its production. And if it's not, then they will increase its production. As simple as that. Next is Nash equilibrium. I don't know if it is Nash equilibrium or Nash equilibrium, but you guys know, you should Google it. I will read you guys the meaning of Nash equilibrium from my notes, okay? Because it is simplified here. So Nash equilibrium occurs when firms in market, each trying to maximize their profit, choose their own best strategy given that the strategies of all other firms have chosen. What are they doing? All of them are trying their best as they can. So neither can benefit by changing its own strategy while other firm strategy remains unchanged. Okay. Let's take an example to understand this. Suppose there are two petrol pumps, okay, on the same road. So if one lowers its prices too much, both lose profit because both are losing on margin. And if both set slightly higher prices but equal prices, they can maximize their profit. Neither wants to change their strategy alone in this situation. Now, second, have you ever wondered on how the companies determine that, or how a person determines what kind of market structure a company is in? So to determine this, there are few approaches. For example, first one is econometric approach. Now, here what economists try is to estimate how sensitive the demand is to the price, just like elasticity and inelasticity. So if firm is highly elastic, meaning consumers quickly switch when prices change, so this when this happens, it is more closer to perfect competition. And if demand is inelastic, like meaning people buy even if prices rise, the firm has market power. This can mean monopoly or oligopoly. Everything has their own limitations. So even this approach has its limitations. And there is a big challenge called as endogeneity. What is this? Because the prices and outputs are determined together by supply and demand. It's hard to separate both of them. It's hard to determine on why the output is increasing because of supply or because of demand or what. Then the second disadvantage is that there is this method it requires actually a huge amount of data, often historical data, which is not always available in the market. Next is cross-sectional analysis. Now, in this method, we look at data across different firms in the same industry and during the same time period. We can do it by comparing sales, prices, and output of firms during the same time period. And this, using this, economists can judge on how concentrated or how competitive the market is. For example, in a smartphone industry, which is comparing sales of Apple, Samsung, Xiaomi, and others in the same year, gives us a picture of market dominance. If two firms like account of around, we can say 80% of sales, then those two firms are more like oligopoly, correct? So this is how this cross-section analysis is used. Okay, next, there are actually simpler measures too for this. That is uh, concentration ratio and Herfindahl-Hirschman index. I know this is correct pronunciation, I mean. So first, let's understand what concentration ratio is. So in concentration ratio, this measures the combined market share of largest firms in industry. What is its formula? Sales of the top N firms divided by total industry sales into 100. Now, a higher concentration ratio means that only a few firms dominate the market. Let's take an example to understand this. So, in suppose short drinks, soft drinks market, Coca-Cola and Pepsi together they control around 70% of the global market. Now, this shows us that there is high concentration ratio, which means that there is oligopoly. Then let's take opposite example in agriculture like wheat farming. No single farmer will control the market, correct? So the concentration ratio is equal to zero. Then it means that there is perfect competition. So if CR is equal to 100, then there is monopoly, and if CR is equal to zero, then there is perfect competition. Now, what is its limitation? Suppose two big firms are merging together. So, CR might not change much because of that, but in reality, the market power could have still increased a lot more than what this ratio shows. That's why we actually need another measure, that is Herfindahl-Hirschman index. What this does is this adds up the square of each firm's market share. Now, our question was how will we solve the problem of that not showing market power, correct? So, the squaring, because of the squaring, the large firms get more weight and then we get accurate analysis. So it happened again. Somehow my internet just went off and the video got blocked. But let's continue. I will not be sharing the PPT right now because it is the last part and there are only three more definitions that are remaining that you need to actually know. So let's understand what formula for Herfindahl-Hirschman index is. So it is square of market share, suppose of one company plus market share square of second company plus market share square of many companies. Let's take an example. If there are three firms and control around 50%, 30%, and 20% of the market. So what will be your HHI? HHI will be 50 square, 30 square, and 20 square. Whatever you get the answer, it will be around 3,900 something something. And this actually tells us that the market is hugely or highly concentrated market. Let's take another example. If there are suppose 10 firms and each have 10%. So what will be your HHI? It will be 10 square into 10, that is 1,000. So 1,000 tells us that it is a moderately concentrated market. Now suppose if there are 100 firms with 1% each market share. So what will be our formula? It will be 1 square into 100, that is 100. Now what does this tell us? It is a very highly competitive market. So there are some regulators like US Department of Justice who actually use this HHI to check if merger of two companies should happen. Like for example, if HHI is more than 2,500, the market is considered to be very highly concentrated and then this new merger will be blocked, obviously, because they'll have the market power. There are three concepts: cartel, collusion, and diffusion index that you need to just know about. So, first is cartel. Cartel is a situation when firms are selling the same product and they agree to act together. Like, for example, OPEC. They have agreed, like they have agreed that all of the oil producing countries have decided to keep a production quota to keep it fair and square. Then second is collusion. So what in this it happens like for firms usually secretly agree to fix a certain level of output or a certain price. Like for example, airlines are fixing ticket prices. Okay, now this is actually illegal in most of the countries. Next is we can say diffusion index. What does this index tell us? It measures the common trends from various indicators. Like, for example, a business confidence index, where 60% of the firms report higher sales. So, index value will be 60, showcasing expansion. This this is all for this video. This is all for this video. I hope you have understood this. I had to do a one shot video for an entire module because this module is very important and understanding all of these concepts together was important. If you guys have any doubts, you can always comment down or always mail me on cfawithj@gmail.com for educational purposes only. And please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I love you guys and see you.